Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Michael Richards here with Elite Athletic Performance. Video we're going to do today is the top 5 weight room programming mistakes for in-season baseball. Really, this applies to every sport, but baseball's our niche and thing that we do. So we're going to get into it from that angle. If you are interested, if you've stumbled across this video, you don't know who I am, you can go click over to our website, have a look at our background, see what we do at EAP, and get an idea of what we've got going on over here from there. Aside from that, we can go ahead and get into it. First thing that I see, and with our consulting that we do with high schools and a lot of junior colleges and things like that across the state and the country, is an all or nothing mentality. You want to be very careful about that. The window of opportunity, or the window, basically the baseball season it's really long, and you can't afford to not be making gains in that window. If you only train in the off season, then what is that, like a 3-month season by the time you get done with summer ball and everything? It's just not enough time to really develop. So you've got to find ways to get those check marks in season. You just have to be careful with your volumes and amounts and stuff like that. So, and we'll get into that in a little bit. You want to have a small check mark mentality. I call it success by 1,000 check marks instead of death by 1,000 paper cuts. So you and this is more of like a societal thing, but like, we as a society, and this, like, I see it, or I used to see it a lot with weight loss people and stuff like that, and we all do it, but we want everything now. And so, like, we would prefer to get what we desire with one big check mark, and it really just doesn't work that way. I heard Kelly Starrett say one time, when people ask him, how do I get strong, how do I get a big strong squat, how do I squat a big number, how do I get strong in the squat, and he said, just squat heavy twice a week for 10 years and you'll figure it out. It's kind of the same thing with that. Like, you want to be able to zoom out over your season and look at that and be like, if you get stuck in the all or nothing mentality, and then you say, all right, well, we can only make it in the weight room once a week this season, we're just not going to screw with it. Then you're going to zoom out when that season's over with, and however many, there's 3 months in a season, if you start games in February, so if you zoom out on that season, then you've missed 12 opportunities to get better at that. I mean, if you're dealing with high school kids, 12 lifts, 12 workouts, 12, that's a lot, and their bodies are dying for adaptation. So, that is not really that big of a deal. Like, twice a week would be great, but like, even if you only make it once a week, if you can make it twice a week, that is really great. So, understand that you don't have to have a whole, you don't have to have every single day in. You get into that situation where you're trying to lift 4 times a week. Honestly, you're probably pushing them towards an injury anyways, with exhaustion and all that. So anyhow, so keep that in mind. Don't get caught up in the all or nothing mentality. Get your little check marks where you can, and then over time, that will create your situations where you've made gains with your athletes. So, all right, number 2, got to turn down the volume. Not talking about the weight room ox. We want to keep that blaring. We're talking about reps. So if you're talking about weight room volume, you're talking about the number of reps, the amount of work overall, like a zoomed out view as well of the actual reps and how much work was done in a given day. Basically, how close to being tired an athlete is maybe one way to look at it. And I see this a lot. People want 8, 10 reps. They feel like 3 reps it's kind of the all or nothing mentality that I spoke about in the first one. You want 1 to 3, 2 to 3 good quality reps over 10 quality reps, if that's even a thing, every day, all day, twice on Sundays. Okay, so first off, if you're using like 3 sets of 10, that ends up being 30 reps. Like, anything that you're doing at that amount, at that high of a volume with a complex lift, you're not using enough load to stimulate and create any type of gain anyways. It's just going to basically create soreness and muscle hypertrophy, which is kind of funny to me when that happens, because I'm kind of a smart aleck. But people are always in the old school line of thinking. In baseball players, they didn't want their players lifting weights because they didn't want them to get stiff. They didn't want them to get big and bulky. And literally the way that you get big and bulky is using high reps for a lot of muscle soreness. That's how we create actual muscle size. So bodybuilders have been doing it for years. Like it's kind of funny to me that, but like I said, I have one of those sense of humors like that. So, anyways, I use 5 sets of 3 in season. I love 5 sets of 3. 15 reps, that's great. It's perfect for, if you've got an athlete that has a pretty heavy workload. 5 sets of 3 allows them to get good, solid reps. You want those with a lot of rest in between. It's a lot like you wouldn't allow sloppy on-field practice, and sloppy weight room practice is no different. If you have a person that is doing, if you're programming 3 sets of 10 on deadlift, if there's any weight involved at all on a deadlift is a hinge, right? And this is the same type, the basic movement that a player uses when they're fielding ground balls. You're not going to let them field ground balls like that, right? But that's what it's going to turn into if there's any weight at all. It's just a sloppy movement that it's going to, all movement, everything affects everything, So we want good movement. You want to train movements over muscles, especially with your big lifts and the deadlift and the squat and things like that. So good, solid movement I want them to use as much weight as possible that they can still make it look easy. That is what I'm shooting for, right? And so we don't ever really use percentages. I'll probably do a whole nother video on that someday to explain that, my line of thinking on that and how we go about it. So, but like I said, good, solid movement to where they can use the most amount of weight possible and still make it look easy is what I'm looking for, okay? All right. Oop. Next up. Don't work out, train. Okay, so what does that mean? A friend of mine told me a long time ago that working out is doing what you want to do that day, or just something that you came up with that particular day. Training is doing what you know you need to do that you may or may not want to do, and that always stuck with me. That's a really big deal to get your mind wrapped around. Have a plan, train. I'm going to be honest with you. Shock is the absolute biggest enemy of athletes in general, and you don't want their routine shock. Like, mental stress plays into physical injuries, and that is not mental weakness. I don't care what anybody says. That's ridiculous. When you have people that are mentally stressed, their bodies will take toll on their physical bodies. I want my athletes feeling great. I want them to be I want them to be mentally ready. When you start messing with their routines, that goes to the wayside very quickly, okay? So be careful with that. It's not the time. Like, this isn't a CrossFit competition. They don't have to be prepared for everything. They need to be prepared for baseball. We know exactly what baseball has to offer, and so there's no sense in training them to be able to handle these shocks, or these, like, there's nothing really going to shock them that's going to happen that day. So, like, keep them on a routine. In the weight room, really everything, but in the weight room for sure. I wouldn't be messing around with many different auxiliaries and accessories. You want the least amount of muscle soreness possible. So, muscle soreness is about the worst way possible to judge whether there was a good session or not. So, all right. Trackability is the next thing, and you want to be able to take these, when you're doing your lifts, you need those workouts, those lifts to be trackable. When you make things way too complex and they're changing all the time, that is how it makes it very difficult to track. So our system up here is a little more complex, and we are able to track it, but it's not easy to do, and it's even harder to explain to a new athlete coming in. And remember, that's my job. So of course it's going to be a little bit more complex. You have other responsibilities, so there's no need in getting fancy with your training programs. Keep them pretty linear to where you can just, like, it's basically the same movements every week, and you can just add the same movements and the same sets and rep schemes, and you can just the athletes can add 2.5 to 5 pounds every week and continue to progress. And I will put this up. I will stand by this absolutely 100%. The coaches that I work with are very good coaches. They want to be the best they can be. They don't trust they have a lack of confidence with their programming ability, and they feel like what they're doing is inferior to other people, because we all see and compare stuff on Instagram and things like that and Twitter. I'm telling you right now, if you put together a plan that works in your weight room to where your athletes can walk in every single week, every single day. They can see what they did last week. They know exactly what the sets and rep schemes are. Maybe you mess with the accessories if you want, like change them up a little bit to where they have a little bit of freshness, but the big lifts, the meat and potatoes of the work are the same. And they have the ability to see what they did last week, track it, and then add 2.5 pounds to that lift this week and continue to progress like that. I will put that program up against the most fancy, awesome looking program that you've ever seen in your life, because you will get more gains out of that than some random crap that can't be tracked. You'll get every single time. I'll put my money on that every single time. All right. So next, 4 is kind of building on the last 2. Stimulate, don't annihilate. That's a quote from Zach Daycant, who I guess I'm an acquaintance with, a friend. I like him. I guess we're friends, but we're for sure acquaintances. Whatever he might tell you that we're acquaintances, I don't know. But I had a chance to review his book, a portion of his book, Movement Over Maxes, when it came out. That was an honor for me. I remember telling him, I know you're wanting feedback, but I really can't find anything wrong with it. So that was a pretty cool deal. But he's kind of a legend in this. He's the strength coach at TCU. And that is one of the quotes that's always stuck with me: stimulate, don't annihilate. Athletes need to leave the weight room practice feeling as good or better than when they arrived. And I know that's like kind of hard to get your mind wrapped around sometimes, but it's true. Like, in season is the very last time to be crushing them into the ground. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but you just got to be careful with that. So, and always remember this, and this is something that I've always thought about and it crossed my mind. Like, the best, if you lift weights, you know what I'm talking about. The best you feel all day is after your first 3 or 4 sets in the weight room. Don't forget that. Like, don't be afraid to go in. If it's been a pretty long grind, y'all been on the road a lot, whatever, don't be afraid to go in and get a 15-minute lift, like one big lift with 2 or 3 accessories and then some mobility work, and get them out of there, get them some food, get them some rest. Like, don't, that is recovery work. That is really good work. There's nothing wrong with them not being absolutely destroyed every time they leave the weight room. In fact, it's probably better in the long run. So, all right, number 5. And if you know me well, you know that this is the topic that I'm always hitting on, but it bears repeating. Stop conditioning in season. Like, just stop. So the fatigue cycle and the injury cliff are things that I talk about a lot. You've got to be careful with that. They're very real. All right, so the fatigue cycle is basically a coach sees his players, they look tired, they play like crap in a game, and what does he do? He takes them the next day and he conditions the crap out of them, right? I have a good friend that will remain nameless that was doing his internship at a major university. He's in the baseball world now, but it was with the basketball team at the time. And him and the head strength coach, actually, the coach at the time would basically, their practices depended on the game. Like, the game determined what they were going to do at practice the next day. If they lost, he ran them to death, right? And this team was very notorious for going on these long losing streaks, right? And so he would get mad because the game didn't go the way he wanted, and they would absolutely run to death. And then they would lose another game, and he just kept doubling down on that fatigue. This particular person, this friend of mine, him and the head strength coach actually had a chart, and they could predict wins and losses with 80% accuracy, depending on what happened at the practice that day. And that's pretty telling. Tired athletes cannot perform, and if they're already tired, conditioning will not work. It's just going to make them, they have to, like, in order for any type of exercise to work, you have to use it, and it will decrease performance right there, but they have to have the ability to bounce back. And that's literally that's the gas principle. But like when you're trying to use an exercise to make an athlete better, there's this level of performance right here, and then you implement the exercise and it makes them a little worse at performance because they have, the exercise was enough work and enough stress to take them down here. But then they have to, it's called super compensation, where they actually like the ability to perform actually increases, and so now their level of performance is up here. Well, the fatigue cycle keeps them down here, and then like they're tired, so their performance levels here. You go and condition them, then it's here, and then it's here, and then it's here, and it just keeps dropping. The other thing is the injury cliff, so you've got to be careful about that. I always talk about how really anybody, every human being, there is a cliff that they can be pushed off of, a metaphorical cliff that they can be pushed off of with enough physical activity. Some people's it's closer than others. Some people that are in really bad shape, they're all pretty much sitting there right now, even though they only sit on the couch on a daily basis. So, but athletes are always right, they're always a little closer to that cliff because their physical activity is so high on a daily basis, right? Nothing gives a more violent shove towards that injury cliff than conditioning, like heavy, long, tough conditioning, right? It's just taxing on everything. It fries the central nervous system. All kinds of stuff just goes haywire when you're constantly conditioning them. They're running all the time and doing all kinds of things like that. So you got to be careful with that. And then what happens, the really crappy part about it is, injuries are, it's kind of like when you're driving down the road, if you're driving down the interstate and you have your tire blows out, you don't really feel like the road that you're driving on at that particular time caused that tire to blow out. You realize that the tire probably had a weak spot that was put in motion a long time ago, maybe from the factory, or maybe you ran over a curb or something like that, and you kind of put it in motion. Injuries are very similar to that, except we are really bad about blaming the road. Like whatever was happening at that particular time is what gets blamed for the injury, and it just really doesn't work like that. So, that injury cliff was there, and we were just kind of giving a shove towards it and towards it and towards it. If we're not careful and doing any recovery work to kind of move back away from that cliff, eventually that cliff, they will make it to that cliff and get pushed off. So you got to be careful with that. And again, it's okay for guys to not hate coming to practice. That's not mental weakness. It's just, sometimes it's okay for them to not hate life, because no human being on the history of the universe has ever enjoyed conditioning. So, you just got to be careful with that. I probably wouldn't do traditional conditioning at any point of the year regardless, but I definitely wouldn't do it in season. So take that for what it's worth. If you haven't seen our energy systems video, that will explain why how I feel about conditioning a whole lot better, and what the energy needs of baseball are compared to what conditioning does. It's a pretty in-depth look on that, so I'll link that in the description. If you haven't seen that video, check it out, and hopefully this video helped. The last thing, please like and subscribe to our channel. I'd appreciate that. Comments, questions this video may have that this video may have created for you, I would really appreciate you commenting those. It helps us with the algorithm in YouTube and helps us to get this video out to more people. We're trying to create good content like this to where we can help as many coaches as possible, potentially put out a couple of products, maybe webinars, maybe just ebooks, maybe a couple of graphics that would, just something to support our gym, but also help you guys out. Nothing terribly expensive, just the ways that we can keep pumping content out. And like I've said in the last video, if you've watched any of my videos, I try to do something like this, some type of short devotional. I feel like God gave us a microphone and I need to use it. So one of my random thoughts that I have a lot is that if you have a bad taste in your mouth about Christianity, then it was likely caused by religious Christians, not God. And so don't let a bad experience by somebody that really needs to reevaluate how they act as a Christian deter you from a relationship with God. He didn't do it. It was us. We are the one thing that we as human beings are perfect at is screwing things up. That's the only thing that we always do correctly is screwing things up. And so I've noticed that. I've been around a lot of Christians. My family, I've been around a lot of people that self-proclaimed Christians, and I'm not saying in my family. I'm just saying in general. I've been around a lot of people that I'm like, your behavior is pushing people farther away from God, not actually bringing them to Him. So we got to be careful about that. If you're a Christian watching this, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And we're all bad about it. We all have our moments, but there are just some of us that need to do better than others. So, and I've been guilty of it myself. So, bottom line of it is, if you are one of these, if you have a bad taste in your mouth about it, just don't let it ruin your relationship with God. Please explore that, and if there's anything that I can answer about that, I'd be happy to do that for you. I do talk with you about that, because at the end of the day, if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior, then absolutely none of this baseball stuff matters. So hopefully something in this video helped, and until next time, thanks guys.